Support for WUWM podcasts comes from University School of Milwaukee, fulfilling a values-based mission of developing learners, fostering leaders, and preparing citizens for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. More information at usm.org/mission.
Lake Effect brings you conversations about what's happening in Milwaukee and the people, places, and organizations that shape our community. This is Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.
When you sell a home, the profit you make is taxed. It's called the capital gains tax. You can exclude a portion of that profit from taxes, up to $250,000 for a single person or $500,000 for a married couple. Some housing experts and politicians think changing the capital gains tax on home sales could motivate more homeowners to sell and open up homes amid a national housing shortage. WUWM series Seeking Solutions, Keys to Homeownership is examining barriers to home buying and possible solutions. WUWM's race and ethnicity reporter Teran Powell speaks with UW-Madison professor of urban planning Kurt Paulsen to learn more about the capital gains tax and how reforming it could affect housing in Wisconsin.
You know, when it comes to a single-family home, most people know how much it costs. I bought this house, for example, for $200,000. But what most people don't think about is the fact that if I sell that house for $500,000, then I've made a $300,000 capital gain. But that's not quite correct because over time, I've probably put some thousands of dollars into repair and upkeep of the house, maybe a new roof, maybe a new furnace, maybe adding a bedroom or remodeling the kitchen. Those are all things that would affect the kind of cost basis of the capital gains. Figuring out the basis, that is, what's the underlying cost of the house, is a little complicated, and that's one of the critiques of the capital gains on a home is how many people do you know who've kept receipts on how much they spent on the new HVAC or furnace 20 years ago? Not many. I mean, the other thing about the housing capital gains tax is that there's an exclusion based on the dollar amount. And that current exclusion is $250,000 for a single filer or $500,000 for a married filer. Those exclusions were written into the law in 1997 and have not been updated since. But given the fact that those dollar amounts have not been adjusted for inflation for, about 30 years, now you see large numbers of households that maybe are above that exclusion amount, right? And then the second thing is this difference between single filers and joint filers, which tends to hit older households and the surviving spouse. The other thing about the capital gains tax that is one of the reasons why people are suggesting reform is that really high-income households who have the advantage of hiring a good accountant can find ways around it, right? You can put the house into trust, and that would be a way to kind of avoid the capital gains. Or older households with sufficient wealth or income might decide to keep the house and then transfer it to their children upon death. And the children, when they go to sell the house to divide up the estate, do not face a capital gains tax because the basis on which the tax is collected adjusts on death. So the interesting thing is when most people think of capital gains tax, they think that it's paid by wealthy households. But the truth is that the highest wealth households find ways to avoid the capital gains tax. And what the capital gains tax tends to hit is kind of wealthy but not super wealthy households. And so, of course, the main political argument against changing the capital gains tax on a home is it feels like politically to some people that's a tax giveaway to wealthy households. One way to reform is just to index that number for inflation or bump it up, just double that to 500,000 for a single and $1 million for a married couple. The second proposal would be just to eliminate the capital gains tax on a owner-occupied house altogether. My preference is a little more complicated and wonky. Basically, connect it into kind of the income of the person who's selling the property. But if I had to predict, I would predict that the most likely bill that will pass will just eliminate the capital gains tax on owner-occupied housing. And the second most likely would be to just double the existing caps.
Are there signs right now of like where, politicians are leaning more so?
I don't have a good handle on that. I try to avoid the kind of tea leaf reading. I know that it is a continuous concern in definitely the Realtors Association. It's one of their top legislative priorities. And I hear it from people that you wouldn't normally think of as on the right or on the left. It's one of multiple factors that is keeping housing from turning over as frequently as it did in the past. You probably saw a recent report from the National Realtors Association that the median age of the first-time homebuyer is 40 now, which, again, so that it's giving renewed attention to this idea that we just have a shortage of homes for sale. And we have large numbers of baby boomers and older Gen X people like me who are, living in larger homes, even though there's children no longer present in the house, right? And so the argument is anything we can do to kind of loosen up that kind of stuck market will be better for affordability for, millennials and Gen Z households.
So with that being said, would you say changing or eliminating that capital gains tax, you think it would open up housing stock in Milwaukee?
There's multiple barriers to why most older homeowners don't want to move. And so at the margin, if this is the primary reason for a household, it would remove that reason. I just don't think it's the primary reason for most households. So the effect is likely to be small. But the real issue is nobody has a good idea as to how many households we're talking about, because we're driven by anecdote. And now, I've not done the analysis. I know how I could do it. It would take many weeks and data, and there's lots of things you could try to figure out. If this is going to affect, I'm just picking up a number at random, if this is going to affect 10 or 20,000 households in Milwaukee, well, that would be substantial. But if it's just a few, right? And again, our housing market is so stuck and so dysfunctional that almost anything we do to kind of loosen it up a little bit is going to look like it's going to have a big effect. But in terms of unsticking the housing market, it's not the biggest fish to fry, but it's probably the lowest hanging fruit.
That was Kurt Paulsen, a professor of urban planning at UW-Madison. He spoke with WUWM's race and ethnicity reporter Teran Powell. Their interview is part of our series Seeking Solutions, Keys to Homeownership. Support for the series comes from presenting sponsor Educators Credit Union. You can find all of our coverage at WUWM.com/housing.
You can find more interviews like this one by visiting WUWM.com/Lake Effect. And while you're there, subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast.